I come from a family of painters. That set a difficult precedent for me, and I felt that I had to be really good. I didn't feel I had the talent, and I didn't dare do it. So I did all sorts of different jobs, loads of different jobs, and eventually hit a brick wall and realised that now was the time to paint. And I was in my late 30s, and I just plunged into it. There was no questions asked once I made that leap. It just felt a very natural thing to do. I tried various subjects, but I was basically drawn to landscape almost immediately. I think nature had been very important for me. I think as a little girl, I'd escaped from a difficult family situation into the natural world. I wandered, and I made up stories, and I located them in the landscapes. I liked sort of secret, mysterious places, woodland and streams and things like that. And then as I got older, as an adult, I became interested in landscape painters and in the idea of landscape and the view and the kind of gasp when you see something really beautiful. And wanted to reproduce that, wanted to get people to experience that same wonder. Since I've been living in Wivenhoe, it's marvellous because it's right in front of me and I just walk out into it. And I go to the seaside, or I go to the gravel pits, or I go along the river and I wander around, and I usually then see something that, it's usually a composition that I start with. It's usually a kind of configuration of shapes that somehow feels right, and I feel it in my body, something to do with forces. And often I'll take a photograph because that's the best way of framing that. Then there's another approach, which is through drawing, and I'm not quite sure how these combine, but I think I use the drawing to get to know the landscape more. You know, I'll just sort of sit there and do a very quick sketch of the scene just to acquaint myself with it somehow. And then I go back to the studio and I use the photos as the kind of basis, the composition, and then it shifts and changes. I'm very drawn to grids and sort of verticals and horizontals, and they provide a kind of structure where you can then embroider around it and through it. And of course the river gives me those sort of things with screens of trees and the woods. And there's also an element, a difficult element that I like, a kind of jarring element, like a strange light, darkness, storm, perhaps snow, perhaps elements out of place, you know, bits of human stuff, machinery, buildings or whatever that somehow erupt in the landscape. And nearly all the paintings include water, and I'm not even aware of it, and it's often the focal point. And I don't think that's unique to me. I think an awful lot of painters work with water. I think reflections provide a kind of structure to the painting. And I think they also bring a light into the centre of the painting, so that you've not got just the bright sky above and the landscape below, but you've got a kind of light that comes right into the middle of the painting. The sea was something I discovered quite early in my career in painting, when I used to visit Haysborough in northeast Norfolk, which had a cliff that looked right out on the North Sea, and it was fascinating to actually just watch the sea for hours and hours, and then to begin to draw it, to begin to find a way of indicating the motion of the waves and things. And that's what I started with, is looking at the sea as a kind of field in motion. And then I went back to the sea again and tried to find other things in it, abstract shapes, structures using the beaches and sea walls and clouds and shadows and things. And now I've gone back to it again. I'm not quite sure why. It's water, but it's not like water in a landscape. It's a kind of mass of water, and I'm interested in the sea as a mass of water, and how it behaves, how it moves, and the light and dark and the weather moving over it. And I find myself doing much more drawing and less photography. I'm just letting the pencil respond to the movement of the sea. And then I've been coming back to the studio then and using the drawings and playing around with Chinese brush, Chinese ink, what I picked up a little bit of that calligraphic method. I've been using charcoal, and then I've been using acrylics, and it's more experimental than I've been working recently. And I'm working now with quite quick drying materials where I can work over them, but I can't alter the marks I've made. That's just quite a good way, I suppose, of freeing myself up, of playing more, not trying to make it right, because there isn't a right. Current influences on my work, looking at paintings of the sea, obviously, making a visit to Belgium where there was a big show on about the sea in Ostend, and remembering how wonderful some of the old, more impressionistic works were, like Ensor, who just paints the sea. It's just a full frontal view of the sea, but it's got so much light in it. It's just about light. So I was inspired by that, and also inspired by Maggie Hamlin's present-day efforts, which are very, very different from mine, but I think are amazingly vigorous and energetic and fun to look at. And I was affected recently by some pictures that my friend Sylvia Sussman from California sent me. And she does landscapes a bit similar to mine. But I got the feeling from her that she just did what she wanted to do, whereas I was slaving away doing what I thought I ought to do. And it was quite liberating to remember that it is possible to just create stuff that may not be faithful to the subject at all, but may end up being faithful in a different way. Looking back on my career, which just spans about 35 to 40 years, I can see some sort of pattern emerging, which is like at the beginning trying very hard to be experimental, and I can see a lot of energy going into the work. Then there's a period of consolidation where I'm learning to paint and learning to draw, and things begin to look like reality and become maybe almost too precise. I think where I am at now is more wanting to do what I feel like doing and not worrying quite so much about it being good. I think the judgment that originally stopped me painting is something that I really now want to sidestep and just do what I like. I want to go more into the heart of things. I want to look more. And I've started a series of sea paintings. I think the sea's particularly good for exploring new territory because it's so amorphous and doesn't have much structure, and you can see things into it. So I've started a new series of sea paintings, and I feel at last in some way that I'm just doing what I like to do.